Yeah.
Welcome to Tony at 12. I'm Tony LeBlanc, and today I'm in conversation with James Lancaster, Managing Director of Alderney Electricity, and we're going to discuss the current energy crisis together with the options for Alderney's future energy strategy. James, good to see you.
Good to see you, Tony. Good morning.
Thank you very much.
Good midday.
It's an early start, folks. It's 8:30, but he's been very kind to spare me some time.
Well, Tony, I've got to ask, Tony, what were you like at 12?
Well, age 12.
Yeah.
Mentally, I'm still there.
Excellent plan. Well done, sir.
Unfortunately, right. Physically not. Anyway, let's first of all look at the current electricity, diesel, and kero prices, which have obviously been zooming up and down over the last few months.
Absolutely. So, as far as consumers on Alderney are concerned, electricity prices have been constant since April last year because we have been applying a subsidy to the fuel cost component, which meant so that the company didn't need to break the current electricity price cap, which is 50 pence a unit. So that has been the same. We can't break the price cap without permission of the states. So for the time being, that will stay the same. The diesel and kero prices are interesting. I imagine you picked up a piece that I dropped into the journal a few weeks back, which is describing that on occasion, the fact that we only have a delivery of fuel every 3 months or so means that we can avoid the worst volatility of fuel prices. And this was certainly the case between the April and August deliveries. Our next fuel delivery is due for back end of the first, possibly second week in December. At the moment, fuel prices, the kerosene and diesel prices have gone back up again. And this is because two things really have pushed it. Firstly, OPEC's announcement in early October that they were going to restrict output. Don't need to get into the politics of that, but clearly if they are restricting output, then the immediate response is for the prices to rise in the markets. Okay. Second thing was the disastrous UK mini budget, which crucified foreign exchange rates. And therefore the sort of dollar to pound ratio has had a similar effect, pushing fuel prices north. So when I last looked, which was a couple of weeks back, the fuel price was back up to where we were in July. So probably up, kerosene hadn't risen so much, so that wasn't so bad. So kerosene went up about 10 pence, but diesel was up nearly 20 pence a unit, which, if that stays the same, will significantly increase the amount of subsidy that's being applied on the electricity price. Obviously, it affects people driving around in their diesel-powered vehicles, but I am less concerned about that than I am concerned about, personally, than the electricity price and the price of kerosene for heating oil. There is hope that by the time that the fuel comes back, the next delivery comes in December, that the situation will have normalized. What generally happens is you have these perturbations, in this case, as I say, OPEC announcement and mini budget, which have an immediate effect. And then over a period of time it stabilizes. So I am hopeful that by the time that the fuel shipment arrives in early December, that prices will have normalized and come back down again, but we still don't know. It's still volatile. It's still a difficult situation.
Thing is, James, you can't go on offering a quote subsidy unquote indefinitely, because obviously that's digging into your reserves, isn't it?
No, absolutely. And the subsidies that we have paid out, and let's put this into context. By the time that we reach year end, the subsidy that AEL will have applied from our resources will be in excess of £200,000. Now, that money has come from, let's call it a windfall that the company gained during the COVID period, because actually against expectation, we had a growth in consumption during that time, largely because of the influx from people coming up from Guernsey. people buying properties, people coming to the island under COVID because they could get here and they couldn't get anywhere else. And so at the time we looked at it and thought, oh, well, okay, we've got this money. Shall we look at the fuel price? And we thought, no, we won't, because we're not quite sure what's happening in the future, and it's very risky environment. So we may well need this cash, as time has proved. But I met with states in September to point out that actually by the end of the year, with that level of subsidy applied by AEL, that windfall is gone.
Yeah. Okay.
So if AEL continues to meet any subsidies from its own resources, then that is going to impact downstream on our capital works programs and other things that we need money for. States understand that, and states now recognise that if there are going to be further energy price subsidies, then the states is going to have to contribute to that as well.
And is it very difficult for them to amend that tariff arrangement? You know, this standing agreement that they have with Alderney Electricity. Can they just do it on the nod, or do they have to go through?
No, through the last year we've been looking at that. At the moment, it requires ordinance to change the electricity price cap. And so what I have asked, and I believe this has gone through, it's been worked on and will be in place by the end of the year, is that we, if you like, employing both the state's emergency powers because of the difficult situation we find ourselves in, and the ordinance under the energy price provisions. A new ordinance will be introduced, which will then allow the price cap to be adjusted without further ordinance for the duration of this volatility.
Yeah. Okay. So that would be a temporary measure. Now there are
temporary measure. Now, what I do need to say, Tony, on top of that, sorry to interrupt you, is that AEL have not requested an increase in the price cap.
No.
This is simply a measure that has been taken to give flexibility should we need to take action. And the question really is one that arises with the resources that we have available. Should we continue to apply an across the board subsidy on energy prices, or should we now look at a way where any of the subsidies available are targeted to those people most in need?
Okay, so effectively you've put them on notice, but at this stage they're not actually having to do anything about it.
No, but they do understand that from the 1st of January that will be the case.
Yeah. Now, talking about people and assistance with bills, obviously quite a few people over here that are feeling the pinch. Inflation is really hitting the grocery shelves, as you probably know. Can AEL give any assistance to people that are having a bit of a problem?
I mean, it's difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, AEL does not have a mechanism by which we can readily identify individuals who are in need of support, because we don't do that. That's a state function to recognise those within the community who are in need of support, socially or otherwise. What we can do, and what we always do, is if people are struggling, if they come in and talk to us, then we will do whatever we can to alleviate their issues, whether that is by allowing, in restricted instance, smaller deliveries, for example, at a lower cost just to tide people over, or agreeing to perhaps spread payments over a period of time. And move their payments away from the peak period of energy, which is in winter, and push it back into the summer, so that sort of kind of deferred scheme may help, and we will quite definitely do that. One thing I should say, and I should raise, electricity prices are not going to rise before the end of the year. So that's going to stay constant. But because we're getting a fuel delivery in December, actually fuel prices will not rise before Christmas. So if people are wondering whether they need to get fuel into their tanks before Christmas, please don't delay. There's not going to be a price change between this time, between now and Christmas. So, just proceed as normal.
Okay, that's fine.
What I don't want to do is people to sit there and think, oh, well, I'll wait. And then the week before Christmas, everybody suddenly orders fuel because we won't be able to meet those deliveries anyway.
No. So essentially what you're saying is that if they've got a standing instruction with Alderney Electricity to top up the tanks on a regular basis, just let that happen.
Yeah, just roll that through.
And if they haven't, just to get in touch, in a few weeks' time to get things underway.
And if you're in a position where your tanks are going to be running low this side of Christmas, go ahead and actually order as much as you need to get back into the tanks, because the price is not going to change between now and the end of the year.
What are the chances of setting up a direct debit system with regular monthly payments, as a lot of the providers do in the UK? Because a quarterly bill is a big chunk, and a lot of people probably don't quite know what's coming down the track to them in terms of that bill. It does seem that possibly if you could get something like that underway, help your cash flow as well, won't it?
Yeah, no. Well, we do have a standing order payment system where people can pay on standing order. We do that. So you pay a regular fixed amount, and then the office team review those payments. And if you are getting ahead, they will suggest that you reduce the payment, or if you're getting behind, they will suggest you increase the payment. We have looked, and we are moving to introduce standing orders, not standing orders, direct debits. The reason we haven't done that in the past is that direct debits tend to be more expensive than standing orders to administer.
Yes.
So there's an additional cost associated with that. But we are now going to introduce direct debits as an option, because that actually puts the company back in control of the level of payments that are there, and we can then automatically adjust throughout the year so that people don't get into arrears and don't end up building up great credit balances.
Okay, well, that's good news, I think, from everybody's point of view. Right, thank you very much for the update on the current situation. Let's now look into the future, because the energy policy that has come up as a States of Alderney initiative is basically to reduce the carbon footprint and provide cheaper and secure energy. Is that it in a nutshell?
In a nutshell, I mean, it all flows from the published island plan that was published at the early part of last year. And under energy, the island plan was really a review of submissions received under a consultation process as to what the island plan should be. And under energy, people said quite simply, we want cheaper, greener energy. Which at one level you go, well, really? Yeah, okay, it's hardly surprising. But whilst that may not itself say very much about the detail of the journey that we are on, actually it provides a very interesting stage gate if we consider projects in the future. If we simply ask ourselves the question, if we are proposing to do something, is it going to deliver cheaper, greener energy? If we say yes, we move on. If we say no, well, we have to go back and think about it. And again, whilst that may seem obvious, this is not a straightforward sequential journey. There are things which we will have to do to facilitate and enable a sustainable energy system on Alderney, which may require funding, which again in the short term actually may act against this overall desire for cheaper, greener energy, and we need to recognize that. So it's not a straightforward journey which just continues to roll forward sequentially, forever delivering cheaper, greener energy. It doesn't necessarily work like that. So we do need to monitor that process. We do need to so in that sense the island plan is useful. The states have published a draft policy now for consultation, which breaks that task down into a further 6 policy headlines. What I would say to anybody who is listening to this, do go on to the state's website, do get hold of the draft energy policy. If you read it through, if you want to, I would encourage people to actually submit a response on that. But what I would say is, please don't fall into the trap that everybody falls into with these things, which is actually just trying to pick holes in it.
Yeah. I mean, being a cynic,
what's in it, or rather what's not in it, is less important than what's in it. Draft, I've seen the draft, I've seen it emerge. It is a workable draft. It's not in its final form by any means, but actually what people now need, what now it needs to be, is refined rather than just pulled apart.
From the green point of view, playing devil's advocate.
Sure.
A small island, population of 2,000, if we cut our carbon emissions, is it going to make much difference to the world?
In isolation, no. But if we were the only small island, it wouldn't make a blind scrap of difference.
Yeah.
But we aren't the only small island. We aren't the only isolated community. There are lots of people in communities, of a similar scale, of a similar order and magnitude. So you look at the whole of the Channel Islands and you would say, well, does the Channel Islands make any difference overall? And you say, well, individually, probably not. But by the time you add up all of these remote communities, they make a big difference. So it's important that we do our part, and it's important that we pull down the per capita carbon emissions, because as small isolated communities, our per capita carbon emissions are higher than other people. So they can't be ignored. So we have to do something about it. Not just for saving the planet, Tony, but also for ensuring the continuity of the community going forward and its economic viability.
And bearing in mind that fossil fuels are finite, ain't going to be around forever, are they? Yeah. So let's have a look. Sorry. Go ahead, James.
No, you carry on.
I was going to get on to the various options. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's start off with wind. Is that a possibility?
It is, very much so. The issue that you have with Alderney is there is almost nowhere on the island you can't see from another part of the island that you can't see from somebody's bedroom window. So where you would put such, so if you're going to erect a wind turbine, then it is going to have a visual impact wherever you put it. And therefore, the challenge of wind is not the technical challenge. I mean, there are places on the island where you could site them. Noise is a bit of an issue, but you could put a wind turbine somewhere where actually the impact is minimized and therefore isn't going to impact upon people in that way. So it becomes less of a challenge and it becomes a cultural challenge. My view on this is that you do one of two ways, really. You're almost obliged to go one of two ways, which is, on one hand, you say, all right, we don't like the visual impact, so we'll try and hide it. The other side of the coin is you say, actually, do you know what? Let's embrace this, because this is our effort to make an impact upon our carbon footprint and the sustainability of our energy system. And at the moment, wind is of the two immediately viable technologies, which are wind and solar, wind will make the biggest contribution. And so we need to be looking at it. I was up in Scotland just recently, and I was on Kintyre, and where I was, you could look across, and there's an island called Gigha, Gigha. And it's only a small island, all right? It's not a comparable situation because you've got a relatively small community there, but right in the middle of the island, you can see it from where I was on the mainland. They've got 4 wind turbines, which each stand about 45 meters tall, so they're quite sizable objects. They're all bigger than the TV tower, for example, half as high again as the TV tower, and they're right slap bang in the middle of the island. And I thought, that's interesting. I didn't know they were there. I'm looking up. The locals, the islanders, call them the dancing ladies.
Right.
And that's because they have, culturally, they have recognised that actually they have provided a great boon to the island. And provided an economic benefit to the island. So rather than saying, actually, here's this thing whirring around here, which is spoiling my sightline, here is something that has contributed to the island's viability, the community's viability, and we recognise them as a beautiful thing. So we will refer to them as dancing ladies rather than the scary scarecrows.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say the ones I've seen on the mainland, I don't find them that intrusive. You just have to accept the fact that we can't go on forever, and the wind is here and it's always here and it's very strong at the moment, as you know. It's something that's got to be exploited. So
that's absolutely right. So in that sense, I'd say, let's just embrace them. Let's just stick them where everybody can see them, and let's say, hey, this is a good thing, and let's use it as a badge for Alderney's efforts.
Be positive. Now, what about solar? Because, you know, you and I have been having conversations for many a long year about the Glassay, for example, as a site for solar. Is that still a possibility?
It is very much a possibility. However, I have largely, personally, I always saw solar as a stepping stone to other forms of renewable energy, particularly wind in the first instance. And I rather saw an installation of the size that you would put on the Glassay as a question mark to the community, which really said, look, let's, if we do this, what are we as a community prepared to accept in order to create a sustainable energy system going forward? And if we accept this, do we then go on and do we then accept wind? Do we accept things with this visual impact? The reality is that solar is a less useful technology than wind at scale, because you get nearly all of your energy in summer and very little in winter. And in fact, if you put a solar array, let's say giving 0.5 megawatts peak output, and you can fit that on the Glassay, that would give you something like 5% of the island's annual energy requirement, would meet 5% of it. So it's a relatively small contribution. If you took 2 wind turbines, which produce an equivalent output at peak, 500 kilowatts, you get fully quarter of the island's electricity energy requirement, electricity requirement, I should say, not energy. We need to be very specific about that. You get a quarter of the electricity requirement of those turbines. So the wind turbines are 5 times better in that context.
And it's belching out all the time.
Now the other thing that comes out of it is that AEL is a small community, and therefore we don't need to install very much renewable generation capability to suddenly swamp the system. By which I mean, let's say we had 2 turbines knocking out 0.5 megawatt, so 500 kilowatts on a sunny summer's afternoon, the grid currently runs somewhere between 700 and 750 kilowatts. So if you put up 500 kilowatts of wind and 500 kilowatts of solar on a sunny summer's afternoon, we'd be when the wind was blowing, we'd be dumping 0.25 megawatt of power, because we just don't need it. You rapidly get to the point where the system is saturated, and you need to remember that. So if we were, it's important therefore for the future of the Glassay, if we were to go ahead with wind, and let's say we had 0.5 megawatt of wind, well, actually on that sunny summer's afternoon, when we're going to get the benefit of the sunshine, I've only got 250 kilowatts max of available capacity. So would you be better off doing that as a large installation, or would you be better soaking that up with roof mount? A typical roof mount array is about 4 kilowatts. So we're then saying, well, actually 250 kilowatts, well, what's that? So I'm now at what, 60, 62, 63 properties, and I've reached my capacity. Now, that's fine if you're in the first 63, but how do you decide who gets solar on their roof and who doesn't? Who gets the opportunity to generate cheap electricity from themselves? What do you say to the 64th customer that comes along and says, well, no, you can't have that now, because we'd just be dumping, because we'd be dumping power in order to support your installation.
It's difficult, isn't it? I mean, it's a tricky one. It worked in the UK, didn't it, in terms of the fact that the government gave massive subsidies to the early people that took it up. As time went by, they of course reduced the subsidy. But it's all a question of scale, isn't it? Now, if you go for solar, or if you go for wind,
Tony, the important. Sorry, Tony, just one thing that is important there. With all the solar that's been employed in the UK, ground mount all over the place, roof mount solar, at any one time, it never amounts to more than a few percent of the total electricity requirement in the UK. 50 installations on a sunny afternoon, that's a third of Alderney solar. Over the years, I've got a bit of a reputation for being anti-renewables. I'm not absolutely not. I've been promoting renewables for 20 years, but what I've been saying to people is it's not as simple as slapping solar panels up on your roof. It's a bit more complicated than that.
Yeah.
And that's because of the scale issues.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, if you take,
people do need to understand that.
Yeah. We're coming back to the fact that we're a small island, 2,000 people, etc., etc. If you go for either solar or wind or a combination of the two, you're going to need storage in the form of batteries. Now, how's the technology coming along on that? And have you got enough room in the power station to put the batteries in?
You would, but currently the cost of batteries means that long-term storage of energy is not economically practical.
No.
So what you're doing is you're putting in enough storage to actually buffer the system to take out the fluctuations, because the wind doesn't blow constantly and the sun doesn't shine constantly. It goes behind clouds and all that.
Yeah.
So what you don't want to be doing is actually speeding up and slowing down or starting and stopping diesel engines all the time to try and follow that variable load.
Yeah.
You could do it, but it's challenging.
Yeah.
So what you would do is you would put in a relatively small power supply, battery based, in order to take out those fluctuations, to buffer those fluctuations.
Yeah.
In my mind, what you're doing is you're talking about something that is, so you need a wide battery, because its power output needs to be quite high, because at any one time it might need to meet the whole of the energy requirement on the island, for example. So in that sense, it's got to be wide, but it doesn't actually need to be very deep, because you don't need to store power for very long. So I'm thinking something that would knock out, let's say, 750 kilowatts to meet that sunny afternoon requirement at a depth of about 1 megawatt hour would do the trick.
Yeah.
And at the current cost of battery storage, you're probably looking at 500, 600,000, something like that.
Yeah.
So in terms of the benefit that would provide in terms of buffering Alderney's energy system to allow the integration of larger amounts of renewable energy going up above 10, 15, 20%, which is the level which most people recognize you can do without intervention. If you want to go above that, you need to intervene. But I'm going to suggest that 500,000, 600,000, something like that, is a relatively modest cost for the benefit that it provides.
Yeah. How long do they last? You know, in what's their working life? 10 years, 15 years?
People are talking 10 years.
Yeah, okay. So you've got to amortize it over that period.
Nobody quite knows yet, because they haven't been around quite long enough to see how long they actually last.
Well, I won't be. That's
where I think the information that is coming out suggests that actually you can get a longer battery life, but it largely depends upon how often they are charged, discharged, how they're used.
Yeah.
That remains to be seen. But I think 10 years is a sensible estimate.
Yeah. How about so effectively, if you opted for wind or solar, you've got to add on batteries as part of the equation.
Part of the package, you need to do that.
Yeah. How about hydrogen, converting the existing diesel power station to run on hydrogen? Yeah. Is that a viable situation?
Well, you need hydrogen in the first place.
Yeah, quite.
So yes, you can. The engines themselves, with no modification whatsoever, you could inject hydrogen alongside the diesel. That works quite well. That actually provides you a slight power increase, and actually you can reduce your diesel consumption by 20-30%, something like that. But of course you need the hydrogen in order to be able to do that. In order to you can import the hydrogen, but that's at the moment that's expensive, especially trying to bring it to somewhere like Alderney. There's no supply chain to allow us to do that sensibly. You could make it on an island, but then you need to generate excess power in order to be able to do that. And I suggest, as soon as at the moment, the cost of making green hydrogen at relatively low volumes, which we're talking about, again, is expensive, but it's coming down all the time.
Yeah.
So I'm going to sort of just go out there and suggest that as soon as hydrogen production becomes an economically viable technology, that's the point where you start saying, okay, well, now perhaps we should think about expanding our renewable generation capacity, and allowing any excess that we have to be used to generate hydrogen. And in the first instance, any hydrogen that we do generate could be fed straight back into the power station to reduce the amount of diesel we're using.
Yeah. So I mean, from that point of view, that's we're just talking possibilities on all of these things.
Yeah. I mean, you need to work through this. This is off the top of my head. I mean,
yeah. I mean, how much, as another option, would it cost to run a cable to France?
Well, if you were so let's say €1 million a nautical mile.
Yeah.
If we were connecting to France, we'd have to go down towards Dielet.
Yeah.
So you're now talking upwards of what, 30 million euros, something like that. I think probably 40 might get you there, but even that's a push. Again, so if we were trying to run a cable, this is the debate we had around the Atlantis project.
Yeah.
If you're running a cable on your own, it doesn't make economic sense. And
Right.
I think the thing that we need to say is, if we are going to tap into a wider opportunity, a cable to France, or should Guernsey and Jersey between them decide to build their offshore wind farm, should they collectively decide to cable up all of the Channel Islands to create a Channel Islands wide grid and link that to France, well, Alderney is piggybacking off the back of somebody else's project.
Yeah.
And that's always going to be the case.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
The only time where actually that changes is the point where tidal energy becomes economically viable, and it's got a long way to go to get there. But as soon as it becomes economically viable, then we know that Alderney's tidal energy resource has value in a wider market, and that just changes everything.
And you would be in a position where you could almost export hydrogen.
Well, you could. Yeah, I mean, you can export power at that point. You can export all sorts of things with it. At that point, the surplus money that you're now making from the profitability actually, Alderney at that point says, well, okay, we'll cable up the whole of the Channel Islands and we'll power the Channel Islands from our tidal resource.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
so that's the game changer. That's the game.
We won't include geothermal because that's obviously expensive. We did have a bit of a joke between ourselves about hydroelectric and filling up Fort Albert.
Yeah. It's been meted in the past.
Yeah.
It's a big swimming pool, Tony. It's a very big swimming pool.
Yeah. But it does fulfill two functions.
It does. If we were, again, let's look, before anybody starts panicking, this is just me shooting the breeze, all right?
Yes, absolutely. This is the light-hearted moment.
This is the light-hearted moment. So if we were to build a big tank up at Albert, for example, as has been proposed in the past, and build a pipe down the hill to run it down, let's say, to Corbett's Quarry or somewhere like that.
Yeah.
In order to provide enough power to meet Alderney's daily requirement, you would need a water tank that is about 160 meters in diameter and 10 meters deep. That's basically filling up the whole of Fort Albert to the depth of 10 meters or something like that. It's a big old tank. But then, of course, you need to have all the excess energy to pump the water back up the hill again.
Well, that's right. Absolutely. So it's a non-starter, of course, but there we are. Now, we're getting a bit tight on the old time department.
Yeah,
Mr. Zoom has sent me a little warning through from that point of view. What I wanted to also mention, of course, is the capability of the grid to support all these things, because I was watching a thing on the television the other night, a motoring program, and this guy was saying that, if you've got an electric vehicle, you really need to have a proper power unit put in your house, and that's putting 7 kilowatts plus.
Yeah.
That would have an effect, wouldn't it, on your grid capability?
Yeah, I mean, that's like everybody installing a second hob.
Yeah.
And if you just did it and left it, then that would be a problem. That having been said, if you put smart chargers in and link them back to the station control system and only charged your car between the hours of, I don't know, 1 o'clock in the morning and 6 o'clock in the morning, which you do on a 7 kilowatt supply, given the number of electric vehicles we are likely to have, then the grid would manage that.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's a further point with electric vehicles, which just needs to be borne in mind. So people have done the sums and says, well, actually, at what point, how far do we have to drive our electric vehicle before it actually becomes a better economic option than the petrol or diesel equivalent?
Yeah.
And the answer seems to be about 50,000 miles. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the point being, doesn't really make EVs a very environmentally friendly technology for Alderney, because you're never going to drive the bloody thing.
No. I mean, my old banger's done about, it's 10 years old, and I don't think it's done 15,000 miles, 5,000 miles yet. So,
so second-hand EVs that have already got 40,000 miles on the clock, I'm liking them quite a lot.
Yeah.
But brand new EVs, not necessarily. Again, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying there is always more to this than immediately meets the eye. And you soon get into this, how green is my technology? Okay.
And they are big money, these things. You know, they're not cheap. Let's just sort of close this chat, James, with looking at time spans. Have the states set a time span to actually implement all these things?
Yeah, what we're talking about, we're talking about a journey of, say, 30 years.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's realistic, so let me explain that. Short term, we're talking about the next 10 years. And the reason 10 years doesn't seem short, does it? But it's going to take us that long to remove the constraints that are currently in the system. Yeah. So the next 10 years is about what we can do alongside the existing constraints. Medium term is 10 to 20 years, which is, okay, we've now taken the constraints out of the equation. So what can we do now that the constraints have been removed? 20 years plus recognizes that the technologies that are required, either individually or in combination, to completely decarbonize all of these systems do not either exist or are not yet economically viable. Yeah. So we may be waiting 20, 25, 30 years for the technology to come along in a way that allows us to complete the journey. Yeah. Now, if we then project forward 30 years from now, 2050. Yeah. So net zero by 2050, that looks like a sensible target, doesn't it?
Well, this is the COP hope, isn't it? So yeah, I mean, it sort of makes sense, I guess, from that point.
It puts that 2050 into context for Alderney.
Very much so. Yeah. Well, with that, James, we have just about run out of time. Can I thank you very, very much for being available for this chat today? Very interesting. And I suppose the message is that people should get onto the States website and, you know, have a look at things.
Yeah, have a look at it and just contribute and participate, because this is journey. It's not a one-off thing. There's no magic bullet. We're talking about what we do over the next 30 years, and it's important that the community get on board with this. Yeah. Tony, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
All the best. So have I, as ever. Happy Christmas.
And happy Christmas. God, Christmas is looming. Happy Christmas, Tony.